Hello and a very good evening. The city reported 6 new COVID-19 cases today, with only 2 locally acquired.
With the bulk of recent infections being imported, concerns mount over possible loopholes in screening incoming travelers. Jackie Lin reports.
One of the local infections is from an unknown source. She's a 60-year-old Filipino domestic worker who lives in a public housing estate in Tin Shui Wai. She goes to the district's tea market once or twice a week. That's where multiple COVID patients have also visited. On weekends, she stays in a flat in Yuen Long where she shares a communal toilet. During the incubation period, she had a haircut in Tin Sao Bazaar. Another local infection is a man who's related to an infected patient. 3 of the 4 imported cases are Filipino workers. One, a 31-year-old domestic helper, flew to Hong Kong from Manila on September 9th with a dozen other doormates. So far, at least 10 infections have emerged from that group. Health authorities say it's hard to tighten the current requirement that the negative test result be provided 72 hours before boarding.
72 hours is quite a tight window period. It's a reasonable period because they have to go to the test and then get the result and then show the result.
Apart from the Filipino workers, at least 11 Indian passengers who tested negative prior to boarding turned out COVID positive when they reached Hong Kong.
These are unusual and may reflect a problem in the testing because some of the testings might not have been done properly.
He says airlines should also do their part in vetting the health information submitted by passengers. While it's not possible to interfere with testing programs in other jurisdictions, Dr. Leung suggests the SAR government could still arrange quarantine centers for these travelers to minimize the community spread. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Meanwhile, health authorities are downplaying fears over a potential outbreak at a University of Hong Kong laboratory after one worker contracted COVID-19. So
far, none of her colleagues has tested positive for the virus. Haley Zhou has more.
14 out of 37 swabs taken from the workplace of a female coronavirus patient tested positive for COVID-19. But authorities say it's more likely that she was infected someplace else and brought the virus into the University of Hong Kong laboratory in Sandy Bay.
The positive swabs are quite scattered. Apart from the chair, the mouse, and there are a couple of chairs near hers that are found to have positive swabs. The CT value is quite high, above 30. Some of them are as high as 37.
Samples with a high CT value are less contagious. And experts say if the woman was infected by the inactivated COVID-19 samples she handled, traces of the virus in the lab would be more evenly distributed.
The office will be disinfected and closed, and all the office mates have been sent to quarantine, and so it will be closed for 14 days.
So far, none of the more than 40 colleagues put under quarantine has tested positive for the virus, and the source of infection for the lab assistant remains unknown. This man who works in the same building said this morning that he was not too worried as he has been wearing a mask and areas possibly contaminated by the patient had been disinfected. But some people working in the building called on authorities to disinfect the whole building, including elevators, as a precaution. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
A medical expert believes relaxing the gathering limit should be done with caution for the next week's 4-day holiday.
We may increase the number of persons per table from 4 to 6 or even to 8 if we continue to see the declining trend. Somehow, I think with the increase in the degree of social mixing in the last 2 to 3 weeks, if we have lost this declining trend, further relaxation of the measure may cause a substantial rebound.
Despite a dip in COVID-19 cases, some restaurants have seen few bookings for the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is traditionally a peak time. To salvage profits, numerous restaurants have rolled out deluxe takeaway menus for family reunion dinners at home. They hope the gathering limit can be relaxed, which would allow for more customers and more revenue.
HSBC shares fell to their lowest level since 1995, following reports that it was among global banks allegedly involved in money laundering. A report by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists says the banks allegedly kept profiting from moving large sums of illicit funds over the past 2 decades, despite red flags about the origins of the money. A day earlier on Saturday, the Chinese state-run Global Times reported that HSBC could be included in the country's unreliable entity list, which targets foreign firms that threaten national security. HSBC shares plunged 5.3% to $29.30 today.
A U.S. court has blocked the Trump administration's ban on downloads of the Chinese-owned app WeChat on the grounds that they might interfere with freedom of speech.
That move comes as another Chinese company, TikTok, seeks to stay operational in America. Peter Caveos has details.
A U.S. federal judge has agreed to postpone restrictions on the popular app WeChat. The Trump administration was trying to ban downloads of the Chinese platform owned by Tencent. The edict was supposed to begin Sunday. Washington claims the Chinese company could misuse data threatening national security. But U.S. WeChat users filed a motion against the move. A federal court in California temporarily stopped the ban, claiming that many in the Chinese-American community rely on the app for communication. The U.S. government earlier argued it would not be restricting free speech because WeChat users could use other platforms that do not pose a national security threat. The proposed restriction would make the platform nearly impossible to use for its 19 million American-based clients. The WeChat delay came on the same day Trump's administration originally planned to ban downloads of another Chinese-owned app, TikTok. That was delayed a week as the company ByteDance tries to sell its U.S. operations to a pair of American firms. Saturday, U.S. President Donald Trump said he supported the proposed deal that would have TikTok partner with Oracle and Walmart to form a U.S. company that would be known as TikTok Global. ByteDance says the new company will become its subsidiary. Some media reports say American investors would be TikTok's global majority owners and ByteDance would lose control over TikTok. Oracle and Walmart said in a joint statement that 4 of the 5 board members of the new firm will be Americans. There is still a chance that TikTok could be banned in the U.S. if this 3-way deal isn't completed by November 12th. Peter Caveos, TVB News.
Joe Biden is slamming President Donald Trump and leading Republicans for trying to jam through a replacement for the late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died last Friday.
Biden is urging Senate Republicans not to vote on any candidate before the presidential election in November. And he called Trump's attempt to push through a candidate an exercise in raw power.
The extraordinary plea from Biden to Republican senators reflects the ferocious maneuvering that has followed Ginsburg's death at 87 on Friday.
And now, in a raw political move, this president and the Republican leader have decided to jam a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court through the United States Senate. That's the last thing we need at this moment. As I said, voters have already begun casting their votes. So I appeal to those few Senate Republicans, the handful who really will decide what happens. Please follow your conscience. Don't vote to confirm anyone nominated under the circumstances President Trump and Senator McConnell have created. Don't go there. Uphold your constitutional duty.
Ginsburg's passing has upended a campaign that had, until then, focused on Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, America's economic collapse, and racial unrest that has stoked protests in U.S. cities. In a recent poll commissioned by Reuters and Ipsos, a majority of Americans, some 62%, thought the winner of the November election should get to nominate a judge to fill the vacancy left by Ginsburg. Trump has said he intends within days to name a woman to succeed Ginsburg, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is moving ahead swiftly with plans for confirmation hearings and votes. Just hours before Biden spoke, a second Republican senator, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, joined Senator Susan Collins of Maine in opposing efforts to fill Ginsburg's seat before the next president is elected.
Welcome back. A group has proposed that cities in the Greater Bay Area jointly invest in the development of Guishan Island near Lantau. The island is now under the jurisdiction of Zhuhai.
Under the proposal, once reclamation work is completed, the newly developed land there will be used to accommodate 800,000 Hong Kongers. And law enforcement and judicial powers on the island will be exercised by Hong Kong authorities. Caleb Long has more details.
Imagine the central government allocating an extra plot of land to Hong Kong to solve the city's land shortage problem. The Hong Kong Real Property Federation, or HKRPF, proposed a reclamation and development project for Guishan Island, about 5 kilometers southwest of Lantau. Under the proposal, the plan would provide more than 700 million square feet of land to accommodate 800,000 people. A bridge would connect Guishan and Lantau, providing both rail and road links. The project would be divided into 3 phases. Themed industrial zones would be built to provide more than 500,000 jobs. If work can commence next year, the project is expected to be completed by 2049. More than 250,000 residential units on the island would be subsidized housing like HOS units and flats for first-time home buyers. Around 28,000 private flats would also be built. The land developed under the project would be owned by the mainland government, but HKRPF proposed that the Hong Kong SAR government undertake law enforcement and judicial powers on the island. HKRPF also proposed that cities in the Greater Bay Area jointly provide the startup capital for an investment fund, but it did not give an estimate on the amount of money involved. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The Consumer Price Index fell by 0.4% in August over the same month a year earlier. This is the second straight month for the SAR to record deflation. However, it was smaller than the 2.3% decrease recorded in July. This comes as the effect of different measures, such as the government's payment of public housing rentals in July, dissipated in August. Netting out the effects of all one-off relief measures, the year-on-year rate of increase in the composite CPI was 0.1% in August.
The Community Care Fund is going to provide a one-off $10,000 cash handout to low-income new immigrants. Applicants must be at least 18 years old before March 31st next year and have settled down in Hong Kong for no more than 7 years. They also need to pass a means test.
Applications will be accepted in phases between the Sunday and the end of the year, with those in older age groups being processed first. Around 203,000 people are expected to benefit from the scheme.
Because it is the Community Care Fund, so we have to target on those who are relatively financially needy. So the eligibility criteria require this kind of means tests, such as they have already within our welfare system, or they can prove themselves to be earning a certain amount less than as required in the income limit. The most important thing is they are residents in Hong Kong, and they're coming to Hong Kong for the purpose of staying in Hong Kong. So there are at least 2 categories of people who are not eligible. For those who are in a student visa coming to Hong Kong, and those on a working visa coming to Hong Kong.
A 16-year-old student will have to perform 80 hours of community service for pressing the emergency engine stop buttons of 2 public buses in Mong Kok last year. The teen pled guilty at the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts to 1 count of doing an act whereby obstruction may accrue to traffic. The incident happened on December 11th last year. The 16-year-old pressed the emergency button engine stop of 2 public buses on Nathan Road near Nelson Street. Magistrate Peter Law ordered the teenager to perform 80 hours of community service after considering his repentance and his suitability report for community service.
A Filipino domestic helper has lost an appeal in the High Court to overthrow the live-in requirement rule. Since 2003, the government has required foreign domestic helpers to live with their employers. The plaintiff argued having maids reside with their employers poses a higher risk of violating their fundamental rights, while making them more vulnerable to abuse. The High Court earlier rejected the legal challenge, noting there is no evidence linking abuse with the live-in rule. The judges today added there are no proper grounds to disturb the original conclusion.
A plaque honoring struggles for democracy in Thailand has been removed less than 24 hours after it was installed by protesters. There are no remnants of its existence, just a paved piece of cement. No one has taken responsibility for its removal. The plaque was installed Sunday by anti-government protesters calling for new elections and reform of the monarchy. It was also a symbolic replacement for one mysteriously removed from the pavement in another part of Bangkok 3 years ago. The previous badge honored the 1932 revolution that saw the military force a change from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. The vocal criticism of the crown by demonstrators in recent months breaks a long-standing taboo in the country.
The United States is poised to sanction more than 24 people and entities involved in Iran's nuclear, missile and arms programs. This, according to a senior U.S. official who is speaking on the condition of anonymity. The new sanctions fit into U.S. President Donald Trump's effort to limit Iran's regional influence. The move comes a week after U.S. brokered deals for the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain to normalize ties with Israel. And the new sanctions also puts Europe, China and Russia on notice that while their inclination may be to ignore the U.S. drive to maintain the UN sanctions on Iran, companies based in their nations would feel the bite for violating them.
A 3-ton monument has been dedicated at a cemetery where many of Rio de Janeiro's COVID-19 victims have been buried. The Infinity Memorial was erected to pay tribute to those who died from coronavirus and provide families with a symbol of their loss in one of the worst affected cities in Brazil. The memorial was designed by the Brazilian architect Crissa Santos, who had the idea of building the work at the peak of the pandemic after visiting several cemeteries in the country. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now. Good night.